evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Facebook is continuing to suspend former President Trump's account. The California-based company says they will revisit the decision in 2 years. Trump responds. Utah's extreme dry conditions threaten crops, livestock, wildlife, and supply chains. The state's governor is encouraging all residents to join together in praying for rain throughout the weekend. Scientists say that last year's wildfires blazed at least 10% of the world's giant sequoia trees, and at least one tree is still burning from last year. United Airlines agrees to buy 15 new high-speed jets that could shorten travel times in the future. Flights could even go from Newark to London in just 3.5 hours. Hong Kong authorities banned the annual commemoration of the Tiananmen Square massacre, citing the pandemic. It's been 32 years since the Chinese regime ordered troops to fire at peaceful protesters in the square. Facebook announced that former President Trump will remain suspended. They plan to review the decision again in 2 years. NTD's Christina Kim brings us the details.
Former President Trump is off Facebook for now. The social media giant announced he's suspended for 2 years until 2023. They made this decision because their semi-independent oversight board said Facebook can't suspend someone for an indefinite time period. Trump's account was first suspended on January 7th. The company claimed he used his platform to condone rather than condemn the actions of his supporters at the Capitol building. Trump told protesters in one video to go home peacefully and also said that he loves them and knows their pain. On January 6th, he told the crowd that they should go to the building, but to do so peacefully and patriotically. VP of Global Affairs Nick Clegg posted that Trump will only be reinstated if conditions permit. In 2 years, they will review with experts whether the risk to public safety has receded. If the risk is still there, Trump's suspension will continue. If they decide there is no risk, they'll set up a strict set of rapidly escalating sanctions that will be triggered if Trump further violates their rules. This could include a permanent removal of his pages and accounts. Trump responded, saying Facebook's ruling is an insult to the record-setting 75 million people, plus many others, who voted for us. He said they shouldn't be allowed to get away with this censoring and silencing. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Utah's extreme dry weather is worrying officials as the weather warms and increases the risk of wildfires. The state's governor is now encouraging all residents to join together in praying for rain throughout the weekend.
Utah's extreme dry conditions threaten crops, livestock, wildlife, and supply chains. So far this year, Utah Governor Spencer Cox has issued 2 executive orders declaring statewide drought emergencies. Now the governor released a video inviting residents to pray with him.
We need more rain, and we need it now. We need some divine intervention. That's why I'm asking Utahns of all faiths to join me in a weekend of prayer, June 4th through the 6th.
Governor Cox says he's asked residents to save water by avoiding long showers, fixing leaky faucets, and planting water-wise landscapes. But he fears those efforts alone won't be enough to protect the people of his state.
By praying collaboratively and collectively, asking God or whatever higher power you believe in for more rain, we may be able to escape the deadliest aspects of the continuing drought. Please join me and Utahns, regardless of religious affiliation, in a weekend of humble prayer for rain.
One of the warmest, driest springs on record is threatening another severe wildfire season across the American West. Flames burned a record 6,600 square miles in 2020. California's Governor Gavin Newsom expanded his emergency declaration May 10th to include 41 counties covering nearly 12 million people. Governor Newsom says a further expansion is likely as conditions worsen.
House Democrats have a new transportation bill out today. It would authorize $500 billion over the next 5 years. Here's more on what it would cover and what Republicans have to say about it.
House Democrats have introduced legislation to authorize $547 billion in additional spending on surface transport over the next 5 years. The climate-focused proposal includes major funding increases for passenger rail, public transit, and carbon reduction. It proposes $343 billion for roads, bridges, and safety. That includes $4 billion for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, $8 billion for carbon reduction, and $6 billion for climate change mitigation and resiliency. The plan also proposes $109 billion for transit, including for zero-emission transit vehicles, and $95 billion for passenger and freight rail, including $32 billion for Amtrak. Transportation and Infrastructure Committee Chairman Peter DeFazio, a Democrat, called the proposal a once-in-a-generation opportunity to move our transportation planning out of the 1950s and toward our clean energy future. House Republicans criticized the Democrats' proposal. They called it a wasteful and partisan effort that doubles down on the same mandates and restrictive policies that Democrats proposed in a similar measure last year. It failed over Republican objections. Republicans said the bill is a move farther to the left to appease the most progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Don Ma, NTD News.
Negotiations on the infrastructure bill are ongoing. Biden rejected the Republicans' counteroffer of around $50 billion in additional spending. Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the proposal did not meet his objectives. Biden is set to speak with head negotiator Republican Senator Shelley Capito on Monday. And Biden's Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is requesting that $30 million of the defense budget be used to go after extremism in the military. Critics of the move say that with a broad interpretation of what is considered extreme, this measure could serve to intimidate those with political views that differ from the current administration. NTD's Steve Lance brings us more from D.C.
The Biden administration is proposing to spend an additional $30 million of the defense budget to dig out what they call extremism in the military. Part of the plan would include monitoring the social media accounts of military members. What has some military experts concerned is the potential for a broad interpretation of what they deem to be extreme.
The actual problem with having the Pentagon spying on our troops is exactly who decides what is extreme and what isn't. And right now, the Biden administration is hardly a trustworthy source to be that judge.
In our interview with Jim Hansen, a former sergeant in the Army Special Forces, he says that one of his biggest concerns is the potential for partisanship in the upper ranks of the military.
One of the biggest problems we have right now is that our military has become politicized, both at the top levels of military leadership and also the civilian leadership.
Some say that the Department of Defense's decision to monitor members of the military may be in response to some of those who breached the Capitol on January 6th having ties to the military. Prior to leaving office, former President Trump was greeted with strong enthusiasm from cadets at the Army-Navy game at West Point. And throughout his presidency, his favor among the rank and file in the military remained high. Hansen went on to say free speech should be ensured for the men and women who protect such liberties.
We can't have the military being used as a laboratory for social engineering and a place where you're punished for protected political speech just because it doesn't agree with the policies of the current administration.
President Biden's Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin recently announced the plan to monitor recruits for signs of extremism. The proposed budget also plans on monitoring those with security clearances for signs of extremism. Steve Lance, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
And the Department of Defense announced it will keep its existing policy for the display of unofficial flags. That means they won't be making exceptions to fly the pride flag at military bases. The policy limits unofficial flags from being displayed at U.S. military bases. The Pentagon says it decided to maintain current policy because an exception could spur other challenges to the rules. And amid the pandemic and calls to defund the police, America is seeing a shrinking police force. As a result, one police department in North Carolina will be limiting the types of calls they will respond to. NTD's Christina Kim tells us more.
The Asheville Police Department in North Carolina won't be responding to some of your calls anymore. After losing 84 officers since 2020, they say this move is a result of a staffing crisis. According to Police Executive Research Forum, the Asheville Police Department had a staff of 238 officers in 2019. Based on that number, this would mean they lost about 35% of their force just over the past year. This comes as many police departments in Seattle, Philadelphia, Louisville, and others have also faced staffing shortage. On Wednesday, the department announced on their Facebook page that they will make changes to improve response times for emergency calls. Here are some examples of calls the Asheville Police Department will no longer respond to. Theft under $1,000 where there isn't any information on the suspect, not including stolen vehicles or guns. Simple assaults that are reported after they happened, trespassing if the owner doesn't want to press charges, fraud, scams, or identity theft, and non-life-threatening harassing phone calls, but this doesn't include domestic violence or stalking. Instead, victims of these crimes are encouraged to use an online reporting tool to file a report. People who can't do this are given a separate number to call, but they're warned there may be a significant delay in the response. Christina Kim, NTD News.
The latest pushback against critical race theory. Pennsylvania lawmakers are introducing a new bill to ban schools from teaching this controversial concept. The bill's author tells NTD what he finds problematic with critical race theory. NTD's Allison Lee has that story.
Pennsylvania State Representative Russ Diamond introduced a bill on June 1st that would ban public schools and local governments from teaching certain concepts that form the basis of critical race theory. They include ideas like an individual should receive favorable treatment due to the individual's race or sex, and an individual by virtue of race or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously.
Just a few weeks ago, the Pennsylvania voters went out and stated with a constitutional amendment that we should not abridge anyone's rights simply due to their race or ethnicity. I believe that our children should be taught that all Americans are equal. We should celebrate what we used to call the great melting pot.
Diamond points out that critical race theory parallels Marxist ideology because of the way it divides people and treats people as part of the collective rather than as individuals.
Dividing and conquering our children by making them super hyper aware of their race and how that makes them different from others, rather than making them feel like we're all in this together and we're all equal. I just think that's the wrong direction to go.
The lawmaker believes in teaching students about diversity, but says we should not separate people based on race and ethnicity.
At least one university professor in Pennsylvania admitting openly that this is a Marxist ideology. And quite frankly, America is not a Marxist country, so we don't need to teach Marxist ideals to our children. And quite frankly,
the bill has 15 co-sponsors, and the Pennsylvania House Education Committee will likely be considering it soon. And it's not just lawmakers in Pennsylvania that are pushing back against critical race theory. On Thursday, Georgia's State Board of Education passed a resolution saying students should not be taught critical race theory in schools. The resolution doesn't impose any bans, but may lead to binding rules in the future. Allison Lee, NTD News.
Today is the 32nd anniversary of the Tiananmen massacre in China. And this year marks the first Tiananmen anniversary in Hong Kong under the national security law. Hong Kong police are banning the annual vigil and arrested an organizer. Just a warning, the following story may be disturbing for some viewers due to its graphic nature.
This year's June 4th marks the 32nd anniversary of the 1989 Tiananmen massacre, the first June 4th under the Hong Kong national security law, and the second year that the Hong Kong authorities have denied permits to citizens to rally and march. On Friday morning, Hong Kong police arrest one of the organizers of the annual Tiananmen vigils, Chow Heng Tong. They say it was for promoting an unauthorized assembly on social media. Hong Kong authorities announced a ban on the annual commemoration last week, citing the CCP virus pandemic. This despite Hong Kong having reported no new local cases for the past 14 days. Police sealed off football pitches in Victoria Park, where the vigils were usually held, and announced to dispatch up to 7,000 officers.
I find it crazy, like now it's better, but there were a lot of policemen patrolling the area. This is very close to Victoria Park, which is just 3-4 minutes away from here.
Despite similar warnings last year, the vigil organizers and thousands of Hong Kong citizens ignored the ban and held a vigil at Victoria Park. The event was peaceful and police took a hands-off approach. But those days are over this year. Under Hong Kong's sweeping national security law, anyone that wants to keep the memory of the Tiananmen massacre alive publicly will face a 5-year prison sentence. The vigil organizers say they have no alternative but to announce the cancellation of the march on May 30th and the vigil on June 4th, for the first time in 32 years.
We had been doing things, going to Victoria Park to commemorate for years, for decades. See, last year, there wasn't any national security law. And now we have that. And people can be, they can arrest you because you're wearing something black.
Dressing in black, holding a candle, and shouting slogans in Victoria Park on Friday will be considered illegal. Hong Kong police will be collecting video footage and pictures of participants and charge them, even if they agree to leave.
It's a kind of a horror, terror, and people are facing the truth.
The vigil in Hong Kong used to be the large-scale Tiananmen commemoration in Communist China. The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, has censored all discussions relating to the massacre in China and has never released the death toll. But according to declassified documents from the British archives released in 2017, at least 10,000 people were killed. The crackdown in 1989 smashed months-long pro-democracy protests. But at the same time, the massacre has become deeply embedded in Hong Kongers' collective memory ever since.
Well, I think we will continue to have our own ways to commemorate June 4th, and they can continue to do this silly stuff. It is just going to lift our spirit.
People in Hong Kong will likely have to mark the anniversary in churches or at home for fear of the new national security law.
Many in China have very limited access to information about the Tiananmen massacre, especially young people born after 1989. But not all of them are unaware of what happened.
Following the Tiananmen Square massacre, the CCP shifted its attention to economic growth in order to sustain its legitimacy, and it began to mandate military trainings in Chinese colleges and even high schools. Students at Peking University were some of the most active participants in the 1989 protests. But following the crackdown, incoming freshmen of the following year had to spend an entire year doing military training and had to start school after they completed it. A student who went to Peking University in 1990 told Voice of America, "They train us to be obedient and follow their orders. That's their purpose." At the same time, the CCP has been censoring all online contents related to the massacre and excluding it from Chinese textbooks. The communist regime defines the events as political turmoil instigated by foreign adversaries. A Chinese international student in Australia told Voice of America that back when she was in China, nobody told her anything about the Tiananmen massacre. Later, she saw pictures of it and asked her father, but her father brushed it off, saying the students were wrong and should be killed. She believed the massacre left people with a sense of horror and forced people to turn a blind eye to that part of history. But some of China's young people are still aware of what happened. Citizen journalist Li Zihua is one of them. He left the CCP mouthpiece in order to pursue honest journalism and went to Wuhan to report on the CCP virus pandemic when it first started. Authorities later arrested him for his reporting. He videotaped his encounter with Chinese state security agents and mentioned the events of 1989 in his video.
California's governor was ordered to pay $1.35 million in court fees to a Southern California church. The governor and the state recently agreed to settle additional fees for other churches. NTD's David Lamb speaks to a California bishop for his comments.
California agreed to enter into permanent injunction that prohibits the state from discriminating against houses of worship. The state also agreed to settle 2 religious liberty cases by paying $2.15 million in attorney's fees.
Bishop Arthur Hodges in Southern California says his church went to the Supreme Court 3 times in the span of 1 year.
On February 6th, And that ruling was so significant, it literally reopened the state of California.
On March 19th last year, Newsom ordered a statewide lockdown, allowing only essential businesses to remain open. Churches were not in this category.
It's safe to be in a packed airplane for hours at a time with virtually all strangers. The government was saying that's safe, but it's not safe to be in this auditorium.
Hodges reopened one of his churches in May last year, and it remained open even through the lockdowns. He has taken a restaurant approach where masks are required when entering his church, but guests may remove them once seated. There's also a mask-only section. Hodges says about 80% of his congregation has returned in person, while roughly 20% attend online. When Hodges gives virtual interviews, his background serves as a social commentary. The top half shows a nearly empty church, while the bottom half shows a crowded airplane. Hodges says he likes this picture very much. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
A California bill introduced last December aims to prevent drug overdoses, but several groups, including international ones, are opposing it, saying it will not help drug addicts. Here's NTD's Eileen Ang with more details.
Senator Scott Wiener introduced California Senate Bill 57 last December. It's also known as the Controlled Substances Overdose Prevention Program, and it points out that overdose has been the leading cause of accidental death in the United States and in California each year since 2011. If passed, injection sites would be allowed to be set up, especially in San Francisco. However, some experts say it will likely do more harm than good. In a virtual international press conference against the bill, drug experts voiced their concerns about what would happen if the bill passes.
SB 57 actually encourages people to use illegal drugs since it's not mandatory for the drug addicts to undergo drug treatment after getting injection at the sites, which normally end up being madness for drug addicts and drug dealers.
He said the bill would make it harder to prosecute anyone carrying drugs. People will have plausible deniability by saying they are taking drugs to an injection center.
In actuality, we are not focusing our attention on the root cause of the issue. Drug addiction, the propensity of it, is a behavioral health issue. And we're putting our funding towards the continuity and the perpetuation of addiction versus helping people to recover, to rehab, to provide resources to them, to get their lives back on track and to stabilize.
They warned that laws favoring drug users could pave the way for legalizing all drugs eventually. Drug experts in other countries with existing injection sites shared their experiences and the consequences they observed.
Not one human being that we know of that has a human name has ever been sent from Insight to a real recovery program. Not one. That's a fact. Ever.
They pointed out that overdose-related deaths doubled and sometimes tripled since 2011.
When you go to the first objective, to reduce discarded needles, you can find within their own report, they admit within the report that local people saw no difference in the number of discarded needles after the injecting room opened. In fact, there are actually more.
The team said that many of the laws are created to favor drug users, but don't consider how the rest of society or their loved ones would be impacted. If approved, SB 57 is to be effective until January 2027. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
A recent study reports that a wildfire last year claimed the lives of about 1/10 of the world's giant sequoia tree population. The result shocked parks managers, as the trees usually survive wildfires.
Scientists from the National Park Service are reporting that at least 10% of the sequoia trees on planet Earth were destroyed by one wildfire. The fire, named the Castle Fire, occurred in the Sierra Nevada mountain range last year at Sequoia National Park. By the time it was contained, it had claimed about 175,000 acres of forest land. Up to 10,000 giant sequoias were destroyed in the park. Although the fire was contained by the end of 2020, at least one giant sequoia in the area had been spotted still smoldering as of May. Officials said it shouldn't pose a hazard. The study's author, Christy Brigham, is the Chief of Resources Management and Sciences at Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. She says, "I cannot overemphasize how mind-blowing this is for all of us. The trees have lived for thousands of years. They've survived dozens of wildfires already." The giant sequoia trees are among the rarest and largest trees on Earth. They are only found in the northern California and southwestern Oregon area. Jason Blair, NTD News, San Francisco.
One 2-year-old girl has become the youngest member of the American Mensa with an IQ of 146. NTD's Sapphire Quarter tells us more about this gifted child.
Some 2-year-olds have never seen a periodic table, let alone memorized it. But Cash Quest has not only committed it to memory, but also words, numbers, and continents by shape.
Antarctica, what's this one?
The toddler was just accepted into Mensa, which only accepts people who have an IQ in the top 2%. Quest's IQ, 146. The average IQ in the U.S., 98.
What are some of the unique challenges of raising a genius?
We do have to explain a lot more to her. So, for example, we can't just do the normal because I said so. In the long run, when something happens, she'll eventually say it doesn't work like that because I'm Cash.
Her mother started her own preschool where she teaches Cash and other kids. How much of the brilliant brains comes from the mom's dedication? Quest says she thinks kids are born with natural talents and temperaments, but also as blank slates.
What we expose them to, how we expose them to it, has a large factor in terms of how they gravitate towards learning.
Okay, let's do these.
Quest may have an adult-like memory, but she has the spirit of a toddler.
How old are you?
3.
You're gonna be 3, right? When is your birthday?
In June.
In June. And what kind of cake do you want?
Strawberry cake with watermelon.
Strawberry cake with watermelon?
Yeah.
She's also requesting a slide. Sapphire Quarter, NTD News.
Masks are already a part of most people's lives, especially in New York City, where many have been following the face covering mandates to the letter. But now much of the younger generation can start heading to class mask-free. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story.
Ever since public schools reopened here in New York City, students had to wear masks inside of the classrooms. Now, after months, New York State's health commissioner has announced that mask usage might still be recommended, but for K through 12 students, it is no longer required. And that doesn't only apply to the students, but also to summer camps, which are often held on the grounds of these exact schools. The rule is going to apply to all students and teachers, regardless of their vaccination status. But those who are not vaccinated are encouraged to wear masks indoors and outdoors. In June, the school year ends and camp season starts. And since students and campers are in the same age group, the state has decided to apply the same rules for schools and camps. Individual schools can still implement stricter measures if they wish. They have already decided on a date on which the new rule will take place, and that is June 7th, so in a few days already. I'm Arian Pazdar, NTD News, New York.
Coming up, United Airlines just signed a deal to buy 15 supersonic planes to add to their fleet. Travelers may be able to fly in the high-speed jet soon. And boat sales and rentals are through the roof heading into summer. We hear from the owner of a luxury boat rental company on why he thinks that is. That and much more here on NTD News.
why I'm never gonna let you go. Never gonna let you go. Babe, I'm never gonna let you go. No, no, never gonna let you go.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Never gonna let you go. Never gonna let
How would you like to get from New Jersey to London in just 3.5 hours? You could go shopping on the high street for the day. United Airlines is planning to bring back supersonic flights. It just agreed to buy 15 new high-speed jets. Here's NTD's Evelyn Lee with more.
United Airlines says it will buy 15 supersonic jets from the company Boom Supersonic. And depending on Boom's ability to meet United's safety, operating, and sustainability requirements, United might increase the order to 50 jets. If the jets pass inspection, United is planning to transport passengers in them by 2029. These planes are able to travel at twice the speed of modern airliners. That means passengers can get from Newark to London in just 3.5 hours, a route that normally takes 6.5 hours. Boom estimates tickets will cost $5,000 per seat, but United said it's too early to set ticket prices. If the airline follows through, this could be the first commercial supersonic flight since the retirement of the Concorde 18 years ago. The Concorde was ultimately grounded because of its inefficiency. Supersonics came under criticism from environmentalists for burning too much fuel. But United has pledged to reach net zero emissions by 2050. And according to Boom, its aircraft would fly on 100% sustainable aviation fuel. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
A kayaking enthusiast has set out for a world record journey from the West Coast. While less than a week into his journey, one of his support team talks about the logistics of the voyage.
Cyril Deramo is a kayaker with 12 years of experience. The Bay Area resident is attempting something that has never been done before, paddling across the mid-Pacific all by himself from San Francisco to Honolulu. The kayak was custom-built in England by Rob Feloy, a renowned expert in ocean kayak vessels. It took almost a year to design, build, and deliver to California. The kayak is named Valentine after Deramo's sister. Deramo departed from a marina near the Golden Gate Bridge in the early morning on Memorial Day. The 2,400 nautical mile journey is estimated to take 70 days. Deramo expects many challenges.
The biggest concern that any of us have is his physical well-being, because no matter how well the boat's working, if its motor, which he is the motor, isn't functioning, then that's a concern.
Dave Laustelot is an insurance broker living in Santa Cruz. He met Deramo on a paddling trip. Laustelot later joined the international team of doctors and trainers to provide support for Deramo's summer-long journey.
I texted with him this morning. He's in very high spirits. He's very happy with the way the boat is performing.
Laustelot checks in with the solo kayaker multiple times throughout the day. He sleeps with the phone with its ringer set to the highest level. Deramo is the only person on Earth who has the number. Deramo even has a way to deal with boredom on the high seas.
He downloaded the entire series of the Seinfeld sitcom on his phone. So he's starting season 3 of Seinfeld. So he's staying busy by watching TV reruns in his very small cabin.
Deramo's journey is live tracked on solokayaktohawaii.com. The website is accepting donations for 2 nonprofit causes.
California is seeing one of its largest fairs in the state reopen. NTD's Eileen Ang brings us more.
The San Mateo County Fair this year will be the largest fair in Northern California since the start of the pandemic. There will be performances, rides, exhibits, food, and livestock competitions.
Some of the traditional elements, we'll certainly have the farm animals, we have the carnival, but a lot of kind of new and different and more local entertainment.
Visitors can meet Balloon Man, the Butterfly Lady, and even Elvis Presley.
This is my 45th year as a balloon sculptor. I do about 100 different animals. And this is probably my 8th or 9th year here at the San Mateo County Fair.
I'm the only butterfly today and for the rest of the fair, but don't worry, my butterfly friends, they drop in every now and again. They're all around you, actually, if you just look out in your garden.
Everyone's having a good time. When I was here last time, everyone has so much fun. And I love the fair food.
Ain't nothing but a corn dog. Yeah, thank you very much.
The pig racing competition is one of the popular attractions.
Out here, you're going to see some high-speed action with our little athletes racing around the pig racing track here. We have 10-week-old baby pigs that are really ripping around the track, and they're excited to show off for all their fans.
There will also be food for sale on site.
There are 11 concession stands this year compared to the usual 25. There is also a designated eating area, which means walking and eating is not allowed.
In an effort to get more people vaccinated, the fair also announced that anyone 12 and older may enter for free if they get vaccinated on site. They will also get a $20 food voucher and 4 ride tickets. There is a cap at 35% capacity, or 10,000 visitors. People will need to reserve tickets online and attend their designated time slots to allow for social distancing. The fair will be open to the public for 9 days starting June 5th. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
Global food prices are surging to their highest level in a decade. That's according to the United Nations Food Price Index. Food prices in May were up nearly 40% compared to last year. Food costs in the U.S. have still not returned to normal. Last month saw the sharpest rise. Average food prices went up nearly 5% from April to May. An economist for the UN says demand for corn in China and a drought in Brazil contributed to the price increase. Also, global inflation is causing prices to rise across the board. That includes food, energy, lumber, and steel. And can't find a home, can't find a boat either. Some dealers are sold out as Americans snap them up like they're going out of style. But if you can't buy, you can still rent. NTD's Phil Zoe has what you need to know.
Boat rentals are up. Boat sales are up as well. Instead of social distancing, people are doing some nautical distancing. Boat sales hit a 13-year high in 2020, reporting $47 billion in sales between boats, marine products, and services.
The vaccination's out and things are reopening. I think it's going to be the best season ever.
Even rentals are picking up. Get My Boat rental marketplace expects 1 million rentals this year.
You couldn't go on a vacation anywhere. So they would rent a private yacht, we'd provide them with a private chef, and they would spend an afternoon out on the boat or sometimes a full day out on the boat.
Bella Charters and Freedom Luxury represents over 70 boats from private yachts to party boats between the New York and New Jersey harbor. They're getting up to 300 calls a week just for rentals.
I think it's a growing business. I think it's a very popular business, and I think it's actually going to continue to grow in the next few years. I think it's going to keep expanding.
And what are you going to do to expand?
We're going to keep adding boats to our fleet and trying to provide outstanding service to our customers.
If you're looking to set sail, Captain Paul recommends booking 3 weeks in advance. The earlier, the better. So, you don't want to miss this boat. Make a decision fast. Hop on, join us on this beautiful voyage into the bright, bright future. Phil Zoe, NTD News, New York.
American athlete and Olympic gold medalist Brianna McNeil has been banned for 5 years for an anti-doping rule violation. McNeil had been charged and provisionally suspended for tampering within the results management process in January. She was sanctioned by a disciplinary tribunal as it was her second violation of anti-doping rules. The 29-year-old won gold at the 2016 Rio Olympics and was world champion in 2013. She denied testing positive for any banned substance. McNeil has appealed against the decision. The case is set to be heard before this year's Tokyo Olympics, but McNeil was granted provisional relief so she can compete until the end of the U.S. Olympic trials on June 27th. And coming up, former UK foreign secretaries are urging Prime Minister Boris Johnson to ensure the crisis in Hong Kong is on the agenda for the G7 summit. The 77th anniversary of D-Day is just a couple of days away, but the Normandy beaches are empty. We'll look at how the once booming tourist site is handling the drop in tourism. More in just a moment on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented My Pillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled My Pillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm gonna pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or My Pillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
Figures from Public Health England show new cases of the Indian variant increased nearly 80% in the past week. It has become the dominant variant in the UK.
The COVID-19 variant that originated in India is now believed to be the dominant variant in the UK. According to Public Health England, for the week up to June 2nd, over 12,400 cases of the Indian variant were confirmed. That's up 79% from the previous week's total of nearly 7,000. Public Health England's latest risk assessment finds vaccines were less effective against the Indian strain compared to the Kent mutation. The findings also suggest people are more at risk of hospital admission if infected with the Indian variant. Bolton in Greater Manchester continues to be the most affected local area, where cases have risen by nearly 800 to over 2,000. But there are encouraging signs that the transmission rate in Bolton has begun to fall. On Thursday, over 5,000 new cases of COVID-19 were reported, nearly 1,000 more than Wednesday and the highest since early March.
6 former foreign secretaries urged the UK Prime Minister to ensure the crisis in Hong Kong is on the agenda for the G7 summit. The Conservative and Labour former ministers say the UK should take the lead in the international response. NTD's Jane Werrell reports.
The UK will chair the G7 summit next week. China is likely to be one of the key topics in the meeting of foreign leaders.
In an open letter to the Prime Minister, 6 UK foreign secretaries say Boris Johnson should make sure the crisis in Hong Kong is on the agenda. They write, as the human rights situation in Hong Kong continues to deteriorate, we hope you will personally recognise the pronounced need for international leadership from the UK government on this matter. We spoke with one of the signatories of the letter, Lord David Owen, who says the G7 is a unique opportunity for countries to come together on Beijing's ongoing breach of the Sino-British Joint Declaration, a treaty that gives Hong Kong unique freedoms not enjoyed in mainland China.
We have a residual obligation as a signatory to the treaty to uphold the agreement with Deng Xiaoping, and we will do. And I'm sure the Prime Minister will do this at this meeting with G7 plus these extra countries. And it's very important these extra countries are there. It spells out more the real global effect of these democratic countries coming together. And then they must look at these other problems that we have. The whole of their commercial performance is aggressive. We've all known that they've been stealing patents and misbehaving in that way. But we're now also seeing a military aggression. And for the first time for a very long time, it's clear that Beijing, and particularly President Xi, is considering the whole question of Taiwan. And that means a potential military invasion, which is quite unacceptable.
He joins former Conservative Foreign Secretaries Malcolm Rifkind and William Hague and Labour's Margaret Beckett, Jack Straw and David Miliband in urging the UK to take the lead on Hong Kong internationally. The current UK Foreign Secretary has said the UK will stand by Hong Kong and has offered Hong Kongers with BNO visas a route to citizenship in the UK. Since Beijing imposed its national security law in Hong Kong, numerous pro-democracy activists have been arrested in the city. The pressure is on for the international community to act. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
The UK and the European Union launch formal antitrust investigations into Facebook amid allegations that the world's largest social network is using customers' data to unfairly compete with advertisers.
The British government and the European Commission separately said on Friday they would investigate whether Facebook has misused its vast trove of data. The data was gathered from nearly 7 million companies that advertise on Facebook's marketplace.
Today we have opened a formal antitrust investigation to assess whether Facebook has violated EU competition rules by using advertising data gathered from advertisers in order to compete with them in the markets where Facebook is active, such as classified ads.
The UK's Competition and Markets Authority says it will be working closely with the European Commission to tackle these global issues. Facebook says it will cooperate fully with both the EU and UK investigations to demonstrate that they are without merit. The EU has fined Google nearly £7 billion and is investigating Amazon and Apple.
As the anniversary of D-Day approaches, tourism at the beaches of Normandy has decreased significantly. Many hotels and restaurants remain closed along the 50-mile northwest coast of France. NTD's Jason Perry has that story.
On beaches called Utah and Omaha, and Sword and Gold and Juneau, they come ashore.
It's one of the most famous and historic battlegrounds known around the world, and the largest seaborne invasion in history. 77 years ago, over 150,000 troops from Allied countries landed on these beaches in France and defeated Hitler's army in World War II. The bulk of the Allied troops came from America, the United Kingdom, and Canada. Omaha Beach is usually crowded with tourists, but this year it's been completely empty, just days before the anniversary of D-Day on June 6th. Canadian tour guide Eric LeBoeuf, who is seen here driving this restored 1943 U.S. Army Willys Jeep, says he really misses American tourists. He says they bring a good energy and usually come with a good sense of humor.
I can't wait to get my first Americans back on tour because it's a different conversation. I'm Canadian myself, and so there's topics I can talk to with Americans that I can't speak with the local French around here, be it baseball or hockey or just culture in general.
His tour guide company lost 80% of their business because of France's border restrictions since the pandemic. Another self-employed tour guide is usually booked up throughout the summer, but this year he only has 3 bookings through October. He started working night shifts as a welder to make ends meet. He understands that visiting Normandy can have a significant impact on tourists who know the history.
It's on those beaches that hundreds of thousands of soldiers landed from many different nations. And the North Americans who come over to see this already know it. And they know that they will go through very strong emotions by coming here. And not just sorrow and sadness, even if it's part of it, of course, but also of wonder to see that the people here don't forget.
Many of the souvenir shops have adjusted their business to adapt to the drop in tourism. For example, they still sell classic uniform patches and other D-Day memorabilia, but some businesses started selling more items for the local French people. And this luxury 32-bedroom hotel has been closed since March 2020. The owner was inspecting a luxury suite for her first American client this season, a U.S. veteran who landed on Utah Beach in Normandy during that fateful operation.
Feels good to get back and stand out on Utah Beach and have it be peaceful.
The hotel owner plans to open 2 more rooms later in June, but she still has some concern for the variants of the CCP virus or coronavirus. France is lifting some restrictions on its borders on June 9th. Jason Perry, NTD News.
A rare manuscript containing Isaac Newton's handwritten notes is up for auction. It's on his seminal work and is expected to sell for over $1 million. NTD's Andrew Thomas has a story.
Legend has it that a falling apple inspired Isaac Newton to formulate his groundbreaking theory of gravity. Whether or not the true story has been embellished, there's no doubt that the British mathematician revolutionized the world of science. Now a little piece of his work is going up for auction at Christie's in London. This manuscript contains his handwritten notes on his most important publication, the Principia. The first edition was published in 1687 and set out theories for how the universe works, including the laws of motion, universal gravitation, and planetary motion.
This is an autograph manuscript, that's a manuscript in the hand of Isaac Newton, talking about his greatest work, the Principia. This is the work in which he reinvented our understanding of the universe. He's working here on a second edition of the Principia, revising, improving, expanding what he'd said in the first edition.
This unpublished paper consists of Newton's revisions and corrections, and was an expected second edition of the work. The manuscript shows a return to form after a difficult period in his life.
He had a complex personality, and the year before this, in 1693, we know that he had a complete nervous breakdown. He suffered from bouts of paranoia, he couldn't sleep. In 1694, when he was embarking on this, he was once again fizzing with the energy of one of the greatest minds the world has ever seen.
Newton achieved great fame in his lifetime. He was knighted by Queen Anne, served as Master of the Royal Mint, and was appointed President of the Royal Society.
I think Newton's Principia changes the way people look at the universe, and there's nothing quite like it until Einstein's work into the 20th century.
Despite attempts to refine the Principia, it wasn't until 1713 that a second edition was released. Christie's says documents like this rarely come to market. Isaac Newton's Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica will appear in the exceptional sale, part of Christie's Classic Week in London, on July 8th. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.